Hi, I'm Claire and welcome to the Claire Witch Project. Dun dun dun! A few years ago I was asking around for ideas for cool Halloween Twitter names with the name Claire, and someone came up with the Claire Witch Project. I have been obsessed ever since, and I've wanted to do a booktube project based on that name for a super long time. Really wanted to do a lot of research and put together like a cool video essay about the way that women are portrayed in popular culture and how that relates to the idea of the witch and feminism and all that kind of stuff, and I do not have time to do that research or to edit a video essay. That's not in the cards for right now, but it doesn't mean I can't start on the Claire Witch Project by reading a whole lot of books about witches in October and talking about them to you in like regular booktube videos that aren't video essays. As we know and struggle to keep to, done is better than perfect. I am still going to have a ton of fun reading non-fiction about witches and fiction featuring witches. I'm so excited for the TBR that I've put together for myself this month. This is very much a like aspirational TBR where I pick a million things that I would love to read, and I'm definitely not gonna have time to get to everything, but all of the things that I've picked all have basically like witchcraft, witchery, whatever, or magic in the title. So that was kind of my guiding principle for this TBR, is it has to say witch or magic in the title. I cannot wait to dive in and pick books from this TBR to read in October. I hope some of you will pick up witch books also to read this spooky season, because witches are the best. I've also got a lot of ideas for fun videos to do with the Claire Witch Project. I kind of want to zhuzh up this whole setup behind me and maybe make it look a bit spooky. I'm also working on an original tag all about witches, so that's something I will invite everybody to participate in. But for now, let me tell you about the giant pile of witch and magic books that I have selected to maybe read in October. First up, I've got some non-fiction, and for this I want to give a massive shout out to Kim Yukara and Alice Burton, who are the hosts of the Book Riot podcast For Real, which is all about non-fiction books. I asked them for recommendations for books about witches and witchcraft and the popular representation of witches in our cultural history, all that goodness. They came through with a lot of great recommendations. Also, they retweeted it so that their listeners gave me a lot of great recommendations. I ended up picking 3 books about witches and witchcraft, and then one like tangentially related thing that's not exactly a witch book, but still I bought a copy because I have a book problem. First up, we have Waking the Witch: Reflections on Women, Magic and Power by Pam Grossman. This one is a cultural history of witches and witchcraft, and I'm really excited to read that one because it seems like it's the most like what I was envisioning reading for this project. I have an audiobook of it, which I'm really excited about because I love listening to non-fiction audio. It's like an extremely long and involved podcast, and I'm a podcast fiend, so that really works for me. The next 2 books that I have are a little bit more specific in terms of the subject matter. We've got The Devil in the Shape of a Woman, Witchcraft in Colonial New England by Carol F. Carlson. I've also got this one on audiobook, but because my library had a physical copy, I thought I'd borrow it so that if there are any illustrations or plates, any kind of diagrams or things like that that are meant to be consumed visually, then I could have that reference as well. I think it also helps sometimes if you've got a lot of figures. For me, I prefer to see those things, although the narrative function of nonfiction for me works really well on audio. Sometimes you do want to have an actual page to look at. And this one I was really excited to check out because it uses the lens of witches and witchcraft to talk about gender relations and assumptions that people were making about men and women and the relationships between men and women in that particular time period in early New England. So I'm super excited for this one. I've also got The Witches, Salem, 1692, A History by Stacy Schiff. Again, I've got this one on audio. I got it out of the library just in case there are things that work better visually. And this, as the title suggests, is specifically about the Salem witch trial, which is something that I don't know very much about, but gets referenced a lot in fiction where there are witches that live in the US, and I've read a lot of fiction in the last year or so with like YA teenage witches in the US, and you know, Salem comes up and I don't really know anything about it. I don't actually believe that magic is a thing that exists, so I firmly believe that some poor young women got burnt and murdered for no reason. So this is likely going to be a bit upsetting. I've also been warned that it gets a bit dry at times, so hopefully it being on audio will help with that. This is almost 500 pages with the notes and acknowledgements and stuff, so hopefully I can get through it. I can also see immediately that there are some pages with illustrations in this, so good call, past Claire, reserving it from the library. Now, I said I had a slightly more tangential pick, and that is Lady Killers, Deadly Women Throughout History by Tori Telfer with illustrations by Dame Darcy. And as you can see, this one doesn't actually respect the rules that I set for myself that I must have witch or magic in the title, but somebody on Twitter suggested this as a book that's not about witches or witchcraft, but talks about women who people called witches, and that is women who were evil and doing murders. This is a book about serial killers who happen to be women, and the idea that we've got in society that serial killers must be men, women can't be capable of that kind of evil, they must be witches or something else. And so I think this will engage a little bit with the kind of ideas of how we perceive women in society and what it takes to have that perception of like a witch or a crone or something like that. Also, I'm interested in true crime. I try not to read too much true crime or watch too many true crime documentaries because I very easily let myself be a bit freaked out by it and then I can't sleep at night. So I'm going to try and find the bits in this that are about witches, because basically it's divided in different stories of different women who did loads of murders. So I'm going to try and find the ones that specifically reference the belief that the serial killer in question was a witch, and then maybe look at those. I don't know how that's gonna go, but I'm gonna try and be a little bit strict with myself and not spend my entire month reading this when I have so many other books that are actually way more about the subject of the project. And now we get into the fiction side of things. I am so excited about some of the books that I've got lined up for the month, and first I am planning to do a reread this month of Witch Week by Diana Wynne Jones, which is technically the third Chrestomanci book, I think, but it stands alone really well. It's set in a boarding school. If you don't know the Chrestomanci series, it is about a world where there are basically like alternate universes that people can sometimes walk between, and in this particular universe in Witch Week, magic is banned and witches get burned at the stake all the time, even if they don't do evil dark magic. But one day at this boarding school, a teacher intercepts a note in class, reads it out to the whole class, and it says there is a witch in this class, and then mayhem ensues. I love Diana Wynne Jones and I love the Chrestomanci series. I have read this book a long time ago and I remember loving it, but I do not remember anything about the actual plot, and I'm so excited to get to like experience a Chrestomanci book and regain some of the feeling of reading it for the first time, because again, can't stress enough, I cannot remember anything about it. I'm pretty sure that when I read it the first time it was in French, because I read these when I was much younger, so I'm just ecstatic that I have planned this treat for myself in the month of October. I am going to have to be really strict with myself and not like throw this entire project out the window so I can just do a reread of the whole Chrestomanci series. Next up, I have a couple of sequels that I'm really excited to dig into. First up, I have The Hidden Witch by Molly Knox Ostertag. This is a YA graphic novel. It's the sequel to The Witch Boy, which is the story about Aster, whose whole family is magical, but all the women are witches and all the men are shapeshifters, and he wants to be a witch and use witch's magic. In this first book, Aster meets a new friend in the non-magical part of town. Her name is Charlie, and the second book is about her. She's on the cover. I really liked her in the first book. Can't wait to read more of her story and have her turn out to be a witch. Next up, we've got Bruja Born by Zoraida Cordova. This is the second book in the Brooklyn Brujas series, and it follows Labyrinth Lost. In the first book, the main character is Alex, who does not want to be a witch, even though everybody in her family are Brujas, although I think it makes a point in that book that Brujas are not the same as witches, so maybe I shouldn't be using the term interchangeably. Anyway, the second book is about Alex's sister Lula and how she really struggles to cope with the events that happened in the first book, and as she is struggling to cope with all of that, this horrible accident happens where a school bus that was carrying a lot of Lula's friends and Lula's boyfriend crashes and they all die. So Lula tries to use dark magic to revive her boyfriend, but of course this kind of thing never actually works the way you intend it to, and the corpses of everyone on the bus goes missing, and now she's got a bunch of zombies she brought back to life that she didn't intend to. Now I know I'm doing this project about witches and I'm really excited about my witchy project, but I also freaking love zombies. So when I looked up the summary for this and I realized it had kind of reanimated undead things in it, I bumped it right the way up the TBR for this month. I just had it as a book that's got witch in the title, but now I'm like, I want to read this right now. Next up, there is Hex Life Wicked New Tales of Witchery, edited by Christopher Golden and Rachel Autumn Deering. This is an anthology out from Titan Books on the 1st of October, so I don't have my grubby little mitts on it yet. And also my library system has ordered 2 copies, but they've already got 4 holds on it, 5 with my reservation now. Not sure if I'm gonna be able to read this in October, because obviously I'm gonna have to wait for the people who have reservations ahead of me to read the book and return it to the library. So if it comes through, I'll read it in October and it'll be great, and if it doesn't, I will wait a little bit, but there is so much on this TBR already that I'm not fussed about if one of them gets bumped up. Now, I want to read this because I really enjoyed Toil and Trouble, which you can see in the background if I manage to point my wand at it. Toil and Trouble was an anthology of YA story about witches that came out last year that I absolutely adored. Like every anthology, there are stories that are not going to work for you, but most of them really worked for me, and I'm hoping that Hex Life is the same. This anthology has stories from Theodora Goss and Tananarive Dew and Angela Slatter, whose Tor.com novella about witches I absolutely adored. So I am super looking forward to this anthology whenever I manage to actually read it. One magic book that I missed earlier in the year and want to make sure I actually read is Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. I've read a bunch of Gailey's fiction before and I really enjoyed their work, so I want to make sure to read this particular book, which is about a non-magical PI who is asked to investigate a crime that happened at the magic school where her sister teaches. So I'm really intrigued by that blurb. Some of my friends have read it and loved it. Some of my friends have read it and enjoyed it a little bit less. I don't really know where I'm gonna fall on that spectrum, but I'm really excited to try it out. Another one I missed when it first came out and would love to check out is The Bone Witch by Wynne. This is a book about a witch called Thea who finds out that she is different from the other witches in her family when she accidentally revives her brother from the dead. And then everybody realizes she is a necromancer, a bone witch, and that causes a lot of problems. Now, for a really long time, all I knew about this book was that people were recommending it to me, and it looked very pretty. But again, it has bringing people from the dead and necromancy, and that is something that I find fascinating. So I am really interested in reading that one. That's another one that when I read what it was actually about, rather than going like, what books do I know that have witch in the title that I've got as one to read on Goodreads, I was just like, yes, smash that button. There's not a like. Things that aren't YouTube don't have like buttons, Claire. The final two things on this list, I'm a little less sure about whether I'll enjoy them, but I wanted to check them out anyway. That is The Vine Witch by Llewellyn G. Smith. This one is an audiobook only publication at the moment. It's being published by Audible on the 1st of October. I've got the audiobook on pre-order, and it's about a witch in France who lives in a vineyard. So that's kind of why I was specifically interested in it, because obviously I'm originally from France and I have family that like owns and operates vineyards, so I thought it would be a really interesting like magic system to look at that's got that type of stuff in it. But I think it's maybe a little bit less of a fantasy novel and maybe a bit more of a like mainstream crossover or literary fiction crossover novel, maybe a bit more like Joanne Harris's Chocolat. I don't know. I am going to have a listen to it and see if I enjoy it. And the final thing on my list is A Witch Who Came In From the Cold, Season 1 by Lindsay Smith, Max Gladstone, Ian Tregillis, Cassandra Rose Clark, and Michael Swanwick. This was originally published on Serial Box, so serially published over the course of several months, and I first heard of it on the Reading the End podcast, where they were reading the book and kind of talking about it week after week. Obviously, I've heard a bunch of spoilers about it because I listened to the whole sections on Reading the End, but also it was a while ago and I didn't really have context at the time, so I don't really remember enough that I think it's going to spoil me if I do read it. This one sits lower on my list of priorities to read for this month because Gin Jenny and Whiskey Jenny, who host the Reading the End podcast, had some issues with it. They liked it, but they didn't adore it, and I think because of that, because that recommendation wasn't like the most entirely wholehearted thing, I am not fussed if I miss out reading this one basically, but it is a book about witches who are spies in the Cold War, which is quite different from anything else on my list, which kind of makes me want to make time and space for reading this. So that's it. This was my giant list of witchy things to read in the month of October to finally make a start on the Claire Witch project, which I've been wanting to do for ages and ages. I am really excited to get started with this, to make witchy videos in October, to read this book, to tell you all about them. I am very happy. The spooky season is finally here. I am going to turn off the camera because I've been talking for a really long time, and then I'm gonna go get a pumpkin spice latte because I'm a basic witch. If you'd like to see more from me, you can check out a previous video on screen right now. And if you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button that's on my face for a new video from me every week. I've been Claire, thanks so much for watching, and see you soon.